All right, as promised in the previous movie, in this movie I'm going to show you how to repair seams in a repeating pattern tile. And what I'm looking at here is that midway point in the previous movie, in the previous composition, where I'd gone ahead and assembled the two ribbons inside of a smart object, subject to the offset filter. And what I'm going to do now, you can see that we have these bad seams in the red ribbon that are covering up, incidentally, the bad seams in the gold ribbon. And what I want to do is put a little bit of gold ribbon over here on the left-hand side and fix the red ribbon down here at the bottom. So I'll switch over to the red ribbon image, and this is a stock image from the Fotolia image library. And notice that it's got some extra width. This original version of the image has a little bit of extra ribbon associated with it. And the good news here is that this is a fairly uniformly horizontal strip of ribbon. So what I'm going to do is select just slightly up with my rectangular marquee tool. Notice that. I'm selecting into the anti-aliasing at the top, and then I'm selecting down across the bottom like so, all the way to the left-hand side of the image, but I'm not selecting the little bit of anti-aliasing below the ribbon, just above. And the reason will become evident in just a moment. All right, I'll go up to the Edit menu and choose the Copy command, or press Control-C, Command-C on the Mac. Then I'm going to switch back to the previous composition, and I'll go to the Edit menu and choose the Paste command, or Control-V, Command-V on the Mac, just to paste that guy into place. And I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit so I can better see what I'm doing. And I'll put the ribbon in a place that it looks like it wants to be. How about right there? That looks pretty darn good. And I'll move over here. Now I need to go ahead and, of course, mask this ribbon. And so I'll go ahead and select an area like this, a little vertical area. So this is not the world's toughest mask, by the way. With this layer selected, let's go ahead and call it red ribbon, why don't we? With this layer selected, I'll drop down to the layer mask icon, the one that says Add Layer Mask, and instead of clicking on it, I'll Alt-click or Option-click. If you Alt or Option-click on that little mask icon, then you go ahead and mask that portion of the ribbon away. All right, now I'm going to grab my brush tool, which I can get by pressing the B key. And I've got a little brush going, so its size is 25 pixels, hardness 0%. I want it to be nice and soft for this effect. And my foreground color is black so that I can paint into the ribbon. So I'm painting away the ribbon, I should say, and I'm painting in the bow from the smart object below. All right, that looks good. Now, the only thing, well, there's two parts that are kind of messy at this point. Actually, three things. Three things are a problem. You can't see one of the problems very well. Basically, this bit of ribbon just begins abruptly, but the texture of the ribbon is so indistinct at this point that you can't really tell. But we might as well be careful. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my gradient tool, which I can get by pressing the G key. And I'm going to create the gradient around this area here, but just to test how big that ribbon is, I'll Control-click on it, or Command-click on its thumbnail there inside the Layers panel. And that just draws a selection around the opaque portion of the layer. And I can see that it starts right there, and I know that my gradient wants to end right there. So I'll press Control-D or Command-D on the Mac once I've positioned my cursor in order to deselect the image. Then I'll drag from about this point to here. And by the way, I neglected to mention a very important thing that I did in advance here. I'll go ahead and release. That takes care of that, by the way. We've got this gradient so that we're partially masking away the right side of the ribbon, so it's fading into place. But the reason it's working is because I've set my gradient up here in the options bar. I've set it to foreground and transparent so that I'm not wiping out any other portions of my layer mask. All right, so I just painted in a little bit of black there. All right, the other problem is that this little bit of anti-aliasing at the top here covers part of the gold ribbon. So I'm just going to select very carefully into that gold ribbon using my rectangular marquee tool. And so I can see what I'm doing. I'll press Control-H, Command-H on the Mac to hide that selection. Then I'll check that my layer mask is selected. It is. My foreground color is black, so I'll press Alt-Backspace here on the PC or Option-Delete on the Mac to fill that selected area with black. And now we've got a nice transition there. All right, the one remaining bad part of this red ribbon, notice that all of a sudden we have a little bit of anti-aliasing at this point down here. Okay, so what I'm going to do, that's from the smart object below. That's from the original version of the ribbon. So I'm going to select this area quite carefully, once again with the rectangular marquee tool. It's amazing how much you can get done with this tool. I'm going to go ahead and select that region, and then I'll create a new layer above red ribbon. So I'll go ahead and select the red ribbon layer, create a new layer by pressing Control-Shift-N, Command-Shift-N on the Mac. Let's just call this white, because that's what it's going to be filled with. And I'll press Control-Backspace or Command-Delete to fill that region with white, because white is my background color. All right, so that takes care of the red ribbon. Looks lovely. All right, now let's get some gold ribbon action going. I'll switch to my original gold ribbon image. And the longest length of gold ribbon is up here at the top. So I'm going to grab it like so. And Control-C, Command-C on the Mac to copy it. Switch back to my composition. Control-V, Command-V in order to paste it. And then I'll go up to the Edit menu and choose Free Transform, Control-T, Command-T on the Mac for what that's worth. And I'm going to right-click inside of the bounding box and choose Rotate 90 degrees CW or CCW. Doesn't even matter. I'll choose one of them in order to rotate that guy 90 degrees. And I'll press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac in order to apply my modification. Then I'll move this guy into place. And I'm actually going to apply 2 passes of the Free Transform in a row, which is not normally something I recommend you do, but the rotate 90 degree commands, they're actually non-destructive. They just move pixels to different locations. They don't rewrite pixels. So no harm done so far. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and grab this portion of the ribbon that's covering up the gold bow and just delete it. Just get rid of it. And actually, I didn't get rid of enough, so I'll slide it over some more and delete that. No need to mask that away quite yet. And then I'll click off. I'll press the 5 key to reduce the opacity of this layer to 50% so I can see through it to the layer below. And basically what I have to do is sort of shift it a little bit. I've got to skew it and resize it a little bit so that it totally covers up the gold ribbon in the background because it's going at this kind of wacky angle. So I'll go up to the Edit menu, choose Free Transform, Control-T, Command-T on the Mac, and I'm going to Alt-Drag or Option-Drag this top handle right there in order to scale both sides out from the center. And then I'm going to Control-Drag or Command-Drag the side handle in order to skew this layer just a little bit. And I might actually Control-Drag this corner handle in order to distort the ribbon out a little bit and Control-Drag this one as well. That would be a Command-Drag of those 2 handles on the Mac, by the way, in order to move those handles independently, so we're applying a 4-point distortion. All right, then I'll press the Enter key, the Return key on the Mac, in order to go ahead and apply that modification. Now, that was a destructive pass of Free Transform for what that's worth. All right, now I'm going to get my lasso tool right here. And actually, you may feel more comfortable with the polygonal lasso tool, so I'll go ahead and grab that guy. And I'll click around the area that should be opaque where this ribbon is concerned. So it's a little too big right now, just so I have some wiggle room. I'm going to get rid of some of that wiggle room, of course, so that it fits better, so that it looks like it actually belongs inside of this image. And then I'll double click in order to finish that polygonal selection. And I'll drop down here to the Add Layer Mask icon. Actually, let's go and name this layer first. I'll call it Gold Ribbon, just to be tidy. And then I'll drop down to Add Layer Mask and click on it. And that goes ahead and masks that portion of the ribbon. Now, it's not the most complicated mask on earth, but actually it's going to work just fine. All right, now I'm going to press the 0 key to restore the opacity back to 100% there. And that looks pretty rotten. So let's go ahead and grab the brush tool, which you can get by pressing the B key once again. And I'll increase the size of my brush. I'm doing that by pressing the right bracket key. And I'll just go ahead and paint with black inside of that portion of the ribbon just to reveal some of that sort of luminescence that's going on there. Then the original undistorted portion of the ribbon. And then I'll go ahead and paint over on this side as well to ensure that we have a match. Because if I leave that alone, if I left it the way it was, then I potentially create another problem seam, because you may recall that the left edge has to match the right edge. All right, so that looks pretty good. I think I'm seeing a little bit of red ribbon coming through. Yes, I am. That's bad. So I'll reduce the size of my cursor by pressing the left bracket key, press the X key in order to switch the foreground and background colors, and go ahead and paint a little bit of white into there, but I went too far, darn it. And so I'm going to have to undo that. That's the easiest thing to do anyway. I'll just go ahead and paint over that again. All right. Better not to make those kinds of mistakes, frankly. All right. Then finally, the last thing I need to do is add those shadows. So I'll get my rectangular marquee tool, just like I did, and I'll go ahead and select about that region there. We actually need a new layer. So I'll click on white to make it active. Press Control-Shift-N in order to invoke the new layer command. Call it Grads. Go ahead and click OK. And let's get the gradient tool. Notice I'm still creating a foreground and transparent gradient here. But I have in advance set the foreground color, which was black when we were working inside the layer masks. But now that I'm out of the layer mask, it goes back to the color I set it as. And it's a very dark shade of red. So it has a hue value of 10 degrees, saturation 50%, and brightness of 10%. And I'm working with HSB sliders over here inside the color panel. All right, now I'm going to drag in order to create a little gradient like so. And I'm pressing the Shift key to constrain the angle of my drag. That looks good. Then I'll press the M key to switch back to the marquee tool and go ahead and marquee this region right here. Again, I'm being careful just to get the area that has ribbon in it. And then I'll press the G key in order to get the gradient tool, and I'll drag like so in order to fill that little region with a gradient. And I'll press the D key in order to deselect the image. I'll press the M key to switch back to the marquee tool, and then I'm going to press the 5 key in order to reduce the opacity of this layer to 50%. And now my seams are totally healed. I can go up to the edit menu. I can choose the define pattern command. I can define this as a pattern. I can fill another image with a repeating pattern, and we will have no seams whatsoever. So that's one way, anyway, to fix the seams in a repeating tile pattern here inside Photoshop.